Well, hello again and welcome to another edition of Shed Talk, which is my weekly magazine type video series looking at all things exhibition budgerigar, including breeding, showing and just the general upkeep of the budgerigars. In this particular episode we're going to have a look at what I feed the birds. It's been a little while since I did that, so I thought I would, and I know we've had a number of new subscribers, so I thought I'd just run through what I feed in the various cages, including the main flight, the nursery flight, and of course the breeding cages. While I talk about the nursery flight, I did have a question from one of the viewers about how and when I move the young birds from a breeding cage into the nursery or nappy flight. So what I thought I'd do is, again, I'd run through that. I know I've done it before, but that was a little while ago. So I thought once again I'd run through how I personally move birds from the breeding cage into the nappy flight. Like I say, it is how I do it, and it works for me. But I would always, as always, I suggest you do a bit of reading if you're unsure, and talk to other people, other breeders, how they do it, and find a method that works for you. But like I say, this is how I do it, and it does, of course, work for me. So that's what we'll do. Before we do that, though, one of the subscribers sent me a few pictures of their birds, so I thought I'd put them up on here, and perhaps we could start a new feature looking at subscribers' birds and setup. So if you do have any birds that you would be happy to share with the other viewers, or looking at your setup that you'd like to share with other viewers, do either drop them in a message to me or post them on the Facebook page, and I will put them up on the Shed Talk videos. So as always, if you do enjoy the video, don't forget to hit the like button, and if you haven't already subscribed, then please do subscribe to the channel, and of course do comment. So let's have a look at those subscribers' birds. So I normally get all of my seed from, or the vast majority of my seed from Haves, just because that's what I've always have done, for no other reason. I'm not sponsored by, or the channel is not sponsored by Haves. It's just something that I've always done. So I do find the seed nice and clean. I've never get any bits and pieces in there, very little dust in there, and so on and so forth. So that's the seed that I use for the for all of the flights. The main staple seed diet that I give the birds. So in the main flight, nursery flight, and the breeding cages. So all of the cages, I feed the birds Budgie Breeders blend. So the Haves Budgie Breeder blend. This is what you can see here, and it's a mix of plain canary seed and yellow millet, although it does look as if there might be a tiny little bit of red millet in there as well. So that's the main seed that I use in all of the flights. It's fed in, I used to feed it in the main flight in hoppers, but I had a couple of occasions where one of the hoppers in particular wasn't flowing very well, and therefore they weren't able to get at the seed. So I've now moved over to just feeding in shallow dishes. I use a large shallow dish that I suppose you put underneath a pot plant, that sort of thing. So I just change that every day, so top it up every day. They never eat all the seed that's in it, so I'm not worried about them ever going short. But that is what I feed it in the main flight. In the nursery flight, I use a jam jar feeder in the nursery flight, and in the main, or in all of the breeding cages, I use a seed dish, which has worked well up to now. So that's the main seed, the staple diet that I give them. I would say that obviously if I'm lucky and I will win a bag of seed at one of the either one of the bird societies that I am a member of, Swindon, Oxford 1910, or any of the shows when I enter the seed raffle. If I win that, I don't worry too much. I will use whatever that bag of seed is. So it's not like I will not use any other seed type. I do think that most of the major brands are very, very similar. So that's the main seed that I will use. So the second seed that I use is a tonic seed. I do feed this all year round in all of the flights and cages, but I feed it in a smaller dish. So this is the one that I use. Once again, it's from Hayes. Most of the tonic seeds though are fairly similar and contain very similar ingredients. The Hayes one, I believe, contains a mix including red millet, naked oats, yellow millet, panicum millet, black rapeseed, linseed, and Niger seed, and I believe Japanese millet as well. So you can, when you first open the bag, or when the bag's delivered of this, you really can smell the linseed in it. So if you've got anybody that doesn't like linseed, then this particular blend will upset them, I expect. The birds do enjoy this. As I say, it's fed in all of the cages, so and I feed it in a slightly smaller dishes in the breeding cage and also in the nursery flight, and the same again in the all of the breeding cages. What I found, in particularly in the breeding cages, is that when the parents are feeding, or even before they're feeding, the birds will move once I put this in, they'll move very quickly between the soft food, which I serve at the same time as I top this up. So they'll move quickly between the soft food and this food. So taking some soft food, then taking some of the tonic seed, then moving back to the soft food, and then moving back to the tonic seed. So they clearly enjoy this seed. It does obviously give the birds a bit of a mix. I don't feed masses of it in the two flights, so they just get a small dish of it. But every morning when I change the seed, it's all gone in both the nursery flight and in the main flight. So the birds again get through this quite quickly and then move on to the main type of seed for the rest of the day. So that's the second seed that I feed. Like I say, it's a tonic seed, Budgerigar tonic seed, and yeah, it's one of those seeds that they all seem to enjoy. And the final seed that I feed is just a plain red millet that you can see here. I serve this only actually in the main flight and in the nursery cage, and it really is just as a I suppose to give the birds something else to eat other than the other seed. So it's just something different, I suppose, for them, giving them a little bit of variety. Again, it's red millet from Hayes. I expect all the major seed producers will do red millet. You can see the sort of amount that I feed. That's roughly what I feed. You can see there in the main flight. So I don't give them very much of this, and a bit like the tonic seed, this is all gone when I change it or when I come to refresh it at the beginning of the day, so they do get through it all. So like I say, I serve a small amount of this in the main flight, and a similar amount in the nursery flight, and again in the nursery flight it all tends to go. I don't serve it in the breeding cages, partly because the breeding cages get additional soft food, and it would really sort of I think there would be just too much going on in the breeding cages. That's the only reason I don't serve it in there, because I serve additional soft food in the breeding cages, which sort of nicely leads me on to talk about the soft food then that I produce, or that I give the birds. Moving on now then to the soft food that I use. I've just had to make some more that you can see here, so it gives you a view of what it looks like. I feed this in the main flight 3 times a week, and in the nursery and breeding cages every day in a small dish. I feed it at a ratio of about 1 teaspoon per bird. What I would say though is that sometimes you'll get a pair that doesn't touch it very much, and sometimes you'll get a pair that eat quite a lot. If they're not touching it very much, then I will normally reduce that very slightly. I will reduce that until I'm reasonably sure that it's all going. And when a pair is feeding chicks, I will quite often increase the amount of soft food, just making sure, of course, that it's all fully eaten, and if not, then I'll reduce it back down again. I did do a video on my soft food mix quite a while ago, and I'll put a link across the top of the screen to it if you want to go and have a look at that. I have added one further ingredient, but generally the video shows what I put into the soft food now I make it. If you would like me to update this video and do another one on the soft food, then just let me know, leave a comment, and I will do that. So that is the soft food. I store it, I make enough probably for about a week to 2 weeks, and I store it in the fridge. There's no ingredients in it that are going to go off, so it should be fine in the fridge for those 2 weeks. Well, that's a quick look at what I feed the birds. Like I say, the soft food mix is fairly similar to the video that's already on the YouTube site, on the Shed Talk YouTube site, so you could always go back and have a search if you want to have a look at that. Alternatively, if you would like me to do another video on that and bring it more up to date, then let me know in the comments, and I'm more than happy to do that. So the final bit we're going to look at in this video then is moving the a couple of recent babies from the breeding cage into the nursery flight. We have some youngsters in cage 4 that are about ready to be moved. So how do I move the young birds then, or the babies, the chicks, from the breeding cage into the nursery flight? So it starts with me then, as the birds leave the nest box. I always like to give young birds at least 2 weeks from the time they leave the nest box before I think about moving them. But of course this does vary. Some chicks will spend longer in the nest box and some chicks will jump the nest box early. So it's just a general guide. 2 weeks after they've left the nest box, I will begin to think about moving the birds. What I like to be able to confirm and be able to see is firstly that the young birds are feeding themselves. So I like to be able to observe that at least for 2 or 3 days to see that they're actually shelling seed and feeding. Just being on the seed dish isn't normally enough for me. I like to actually notice that they are feeding. Most of my chicks, because they've had an opportunity inside the nest box to pick out the millet sprays, will be feeding themselves, or pretty much feeding themselves by the time they leave the nest box. I said it before, I then put some millet into the bottom of the breeding cage, just so that they can carry on feeding on millet sprays. They do find it easier, I think, to pick at the millet sprays than at the normal seed. But normally after 2 weeks, you'll find that the young birds are feeding themselves. So once I've observed that, the other key indicator for me is that the young birds are perching. So once I see them perching, like these couple of birds here are doing, I am reasonably sure then that these birds are ready to be moved from the breeding cage into the nursery flight. Once I've moved the birds into the nursery flight, I carry on observing them in there for the next few days. I like to move them right at the beginning of the day, so I can then keep an eye on them in the nursery flight for a couple of hours, and then I will continue to watch them and make sure that they are still feeding. They're not being overly picked on in the nursery flight. Clearly, the young birds, when they're first moved into there, will need to understand where they are in the pecking order, which is one of the reasons why we move them into the nursery flight anyway, is to get them used to that hustle and bustle of the main flight before they go in with some of the adult birds. Part of the process I find of doing that is to always have an old cock bird in the nursery flight. That old cock bird will show them the ropes. It won't be too boisterous. I sometimes find adult hens can be a bit boisterous and can be a bit aggressive for the young bird. So an old cock bird, one that's gone beyond the breeding stage, normally pop him in there. He will help show the young birds the ropes. Of course, again, try to move them in batches if you can, so there's more than one bird in there, or one young bird in there. Obviously, as the season goes on, you'll have birds of various ages, like I've got here, like you can see here in the nursery flight. Keep an eye on them for a few days, make sure they're feeding, make sure they're settled in, and they should be fine in there. If you do think that one of them is not feeding itself, then pop it back in with the parent birds, and hopefully they will carry on feeding. Otherwise you may have to top it up yourself, but I've never really had a problem if after 2 weeks you're moving them and those signs of seeing them feed and seeing them perching have been confirmed by you. So there we go, that's how I move the birds from the nursery flight into from the breeding cage into the nursery flight. Well, there we are, that's all of the young birds back into the nursery flight. I hope you enjoyed that. Coming up in the next couple of weeks, we've got a real treat. I was fortunate enough to video a talk at Swindon BS by Peter Merritt. Peter is a well-known, well-established fancier. He has won lots of best in shows and numerous CCs and all the rest of it, and it was a very interesting talk by Peter, and like I say, I've got a recording of it. I'm probably going to have to split it into a couple of parts, just because it was quite a long talk. The first of those parts will be, or should be being posted around about the 6th of May. So if you don't want to miss that, then don't forget to hit that bell so you'll get a notification of when that video has been released. But it should be released around about the 6th of May. But until the next video, as always, if you do enjoy them, don't forget to subscribe, but do stay safe and enjoy your birds.